At 3 a.m., my phone exploded with my son's panicked voice. Dad, they need $38,000 right now, or Kaya dies tonight. Emergency surgery. My daughter-in-law. Cancer spreading fast. I've been a doctor for 35 years. I've heard every medical crisis imaginable. But when it's your family bleeding out in some hospital, your training goes silent and your heart takes over. I transferred the money without asking questions. $38,000 from my retirement account. Gone in 4 minutes. 6 hours later, my phone rang again. This time it was Kaya herself, calling from a beach in Hawaii, laughing, healthy, completely unaware that her husband had just told me she was dying. That second call destroyed my family forever. But before I tell you what I discovered next, drop a comment and let me know what time you're listening to this. And hit subscribe because this story gets much darker. But the call I got 6 hours later exposed everything. But before I tell you what that second call revealed, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. And don't forget to subscribe for more family betrayal stories. 35 years at MedStar Hospital taught me to recognize real emergencies. The 2 a.m. trauma cases, the 4 a.m. heart attacks, the panic in a voice when death is actually knocking. I'd saved thousands of lives, talked hundreds of families through their worst moments. Medicine was my calling, my expertise, my identity. After Margaret died, I swore I'd never let money stand between family and health. Margaret's cancer took 18 months to kill her. Real cancer, the kind that steals your hair, your weight, your hope one cell at a time. I watched her fade from 140 pounds to 89. Watched chemo burn through her veins while she smiled and pretended it didn't hurt. The medical bills were crushing, even with insurance, even with my physician's discount. But we paid every penny without question. Some things are worth more than money. When Margaret passed, I promised myself I'd use my remaining years to protect the people I loved. Trevor was struggling since college graduation. Weak personality, easily influenced. When he married Kaya 3 years ago, I welcomed her like the daughter I never had. She'd been a nurse before they met. Medical background. I thought she understood the sacred trust between healer and patient. I never thought I'd use those skills with my family. Looking back, the signs were there from their wedding day. Kaya had a way of tilting her head when she disagreed with you. Not argumentative, just dismissive. Like you'd said something slightly stupid, and she was too polite to correct you. During the reception, she'd corrected my stories about Trevor's childhood. Small things. Details only a mother would remember. But I wasn't Trevor's mother. I was his father who'd raised him alone for 6 years after the divorce. Actually, Desmond, she'd say, voice sweet as hospital coffee. Trevor told me he was 8 when that happened, not 7. Always with that tilted head. Always with that smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Trevor would just nod along. Kaya's right, Dad. I was 8. After the wedding, things got easier between us, or I thought they did. Kaya would call me directly when they needed help. Car payments when Trevor's sales job got slow. Mortgage assistance when the market dipped. Nothing dramatic. Just family, helping family. The kind of support Margaret would have expected me to provide. I'd write the checks without hesitation, sign the papers without reading every line. After losing Margaret, I wasn't going to lose anyone else to pride or stubbornness or money. Every dollar I gave willingly, but I kept receipts. 35 years of medical practice teaches you to document everything, just in case. The first real money came 2 years ago. Down payment on their house in Beaverton, $45,000. Trevor called, voice tight with embarrassment. Dad, I know it's a lot, but Kaya found this perfect place, and if we don't move fast... I didn't make him finish. I'd rather have my son in a house than an apartment. I'd rather have grandchildren someday in a yard instead of a hallway. The wire transfer took 15 minutes. 6 months later, Dad, my car died and we need something reliable for Kaya's commute. Another $22,000 for a Honda Civic. Practical, sensible, nothing flashy. Last year, Dad, can you co-sign this loan? Kaya wants to go back to school for her nurse practitioner degree. Another $18,000 in loans, I guaranteed. Education is always a good investment. I added Trevor as beneficiary on my retirement accounts. joint access to my checking account for emergencies. After Margaret died, who else would I leave it to? Trevor was my only child. Kaya would be the mother of my grandchildren someday. Why not make their lives easier? The paperwork felt like love letters. Signatures that said, "I trust you." Bank forms that said, "You matter more than money." Legal documents that said, "Family first." I signed those papers believing I was securing their future, but those same papers would become evidence of the biggest fraud of my medical career. 8 months ago, Trevor called crying. Not the embarrassed tears of asking for money, real crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deeper than pride or financial stress. The kind that means someone you love is dying. "Dad, Kaya has breast cancer." The words hit like a crash cart to the chest. After Margaret, cancer wasn't just a diagnosis. It was a death sentence wearing a medical coat. I knew the statistics, the survival rates, the treatment protocols. I also knew how fast cancer could spread in a young, otherwise healthy woman. "What stage?" I asked, already mentally calculating oncology costs. "They're not sure yet. She's seeing a specialist tomorrow." "Dad, I'm scared." Of course he was scared. I was scared. Cancer had already taken Margaret. The thought of losing Kaya too. "Whatever you need," I said. "Money, connections, second opinions. I still know people at OHSU. We'll get her the best care available." Within a week, Kaya's treatment began. The bills were immediate and enormous. $15,000 for initial staging and biopsy. Another $8,000 for preliminary chemotherapy preparation. Everything had to be paid up front due to insurance complications. She wouldn't let me speak to her doctors directly. "The oncologist is very protective of patient privacy," she explained over dinner at their house. Her color looked good. Her appetite seemed normal. But I knew cancer could hide. Margaret had looked healthy right up until the end. I wrote the first check that night. $15,000 from my savings account. Small price to pay for a daughter-in-law's life. But something about the medical terminology she used felt off. The monthly treatments followed a pattern. Every third Wednesday, Kaya would need another $8,000 to $12,000 for chemotherapy. The amounts varied based on what she called dosage adjustments and experimental protocols. As a physician, I knew chemo costs were astronomical. I also knew they were usually covered by insurance after deductibles. But Kaya's insurance had complications, prior authorization delays, network restrictions, claims processing errors that required immediate out-of-pocket payment. "We'll get reimbursed eventually," Trevor assured me, "but if we wait for insurance, she might not have eventually." The logic was sound. The urgency was real, but something nagged at my medical training. Kaya showed none of the side effects I'd watched destroy Margaret. No hair loss, no weight loss, no nausea, no fatigue. When I asked about her symptoms, she'd wave dismissively. "Everyone responds differently, Desmond. My oncologist says I'm unusually resilient." The medical terminology she used was almost correct, but not quite right. She'd mentioned cellular mitosis rates instead of mitotic index, lymphatic involvement instead of lymph node metastasis. Close enough for a non-medical person to believe, wrong enough for a doctor to notice, but I wanted to believe. After Margaret, I needed to believe that modern medicine could save someone I loved, that my money could buy what my medical degree couldn't guarantee. The treatments continued. $10,000 in April, $12,000 in May, $9,000 in June. I kept detailed records, a habit from decades of medical documentation. The medical details didn't add up, but my heart wanted to believe. By summer, I'd given them $95,000 for Kaya's cancer treatment, but Kaya looked healthier than ever. I started photocopying every check, a habit that saved me. Something about the paper trail bothered me. Not the amounts. Cancer treatment was expensive. Not the frequency. Aggressive cancers required aggressive treatment. But the lack of insurance involvement seemed unusual. "Her oncologist prefers direct payment," Trevor explained when I asked about insurance claims. "Less paperwork delays, more treatment focus." This made sense in theory. In practice, no oncologist I knew operated outside insurance networks. The liability alone would be crushing. But I wasn't Kaya's doctor. I was just the father-in-law writing checks. The receipts she provided looked legitimate. Professional letterhead, medical terminology, official-looking stamps and signatures, but something about the formatting seemed familiar, like forms I'd seen before, but not quite right. When I offered to review her medical records, just to make sure she's getting optimal care, I still have contacts in oncology, Kaya became defensive. Desmond, I appreciate your concern, but my doctor is very particular about patient confidentiality. He doesn't discuss cases with other physicians unless there's a formal consultation. This was reasonable. HIPAA laws were strict. Patient privacy was sacred. But in my experience, oncologists welcomed input from other medical professionals, especially when the family included a physician. Every request to help was met with polite deflection. I kept paying, kept documenting, kept feeling like something was wrong without being able to identify exactly what. The insurance forms looked wrong, but cancer doesn't wait for administrative comfort. By August, we were approaching $130,000 in treatment costs. And Kaya was talking about phase 2 protocols that would require additional funding. When I offered to use my hospital connections, she panicked. The conversation happened during Labor Day dinner at their house. Kaya was cooking, something I'd noticed she did often for someone supposedly undergoing intensive chemotherapy. Margaret couldn't cook for months during her treatment. The smell of food made her violently nauseous. Kaya, I've been thinking, I said, watching her effortlessly flip steaks on the grill. Dr. Patterson in oncology at OHSU owes me a favor. I delivered his daughter during my ER rotation 30 years ago. I could probably get you a second opinion, maybe even a consultation on experimental treatments. The spatula slipped from her hand, clattered on the concrete patio. That's very generous, Desmond. But my current doctor is very protective of his treatment protocols. He doesn't like outside interference. It wouldn't be interference, I pressed gently. Just a professional courtesy review. Sometimes fresh eyes catch things the primary physician might miss. Kaya's face went white, actually white, like someone who'd just realized they'd forgotten something important. I'll ask him about it. But honestly, Desmond, I trust my current team completely. They've been very thorough. Trevor jumped in quickly. Dad, maybe we should just stick with what's working. Kaya's been responding well to treatment. That was true. She had been responding remarkably well, almost suspiciously well. The panic in her voice when I mentioned my connection stayed with me. Real patients wanted second opinions. Real patients welcomed additional medical expertise. Real patients didn't get nervous when their physician father-in-law offered to help. But desperate families rationalize everything, even obvious red flags. Her blood tests showed numbers that made no medical sense. September brought another crisis. Stage progression, according to Kaya. Her oncologist was recommending more aggressive treatment, higher doses, more experimental protocols, $25,000 for the next phase. Can I see the latest lab results? I asked. Just to understand what we're dealing with? Kaya produced a printed report. Official letterhead from Northwest Oncology Associates. Patient name, date, physician signature. Everything looked legitimate until I read the actual numbers. White blood cell count, 12,000. Normal range. Hemoglobin, 13.8. Normal range. Tumor markers, elevated but stable. These weren't the numbers of someone with aggressive breast cancer requiring $25,000 monthly treatments. These were the numbers of someone in perfect health. Kaya, I said carefully, these results don't indicate cancer progression. If anything, they suggest you're in remission. She snatched the papers back. The doctor explained that my type of cancer doesn't always show up in standard blood work. He uses more specialized tests. This was medically possible, but extremely unlikely. Most cancers aggressive enough to require $25,000 monthly treatments would absolutely show up in blood work. I transferred the money anyway, but I kept a copy of those lab results. That night, I Googled Northwest Oncology Associates. The address on the letterhead led to a strip mall containing a Subway, a dry cleaner, and a vacant office space. Her blood tests showed numbers that made no medical sense, but by then I was too deep in the lie to admit I'd been fooled. Pride makes doctors vulnerable just like everyone else. She had perfect manicured nails for someone supposedly dying of cancer. October brought a new awareness. I started noticing details my emotional investment had blinded me to. Kaya's appearance during her treatment days, her energy levels, her physical condition. Real chemotherapy destroys more than cancer cells. It destroys everything fast-growing in your body. Hair follicles, nail beds, digestive tract lining, immune system. I'd watched it devastate Margaret for 18 months. Kaya showed none of these effects. Her nails were always perfectly manicured. French tips, gel coating, intricate designs. During Margaret's treatment, her nails had become brittle, discolored, painful. She'd stopped painting them because the chemo made them too fragile. "Your nails look amazing," I mentioned casually during a post-chemo dinner. "Oh, I use a special strengthening treatment," Kaya said, admiring her perfect burgundy polish. "My oncologist recommended it for maintaining nail health during therapy." No oncologist recommends nail polish during chemotherapy. Nail beds are typically too damaged and infected to tolerate cosmetics. I started paying attention to other details. Kaya's weight remained stable. Margaret had lost 50 pounds. Kaya's hair remained thick and shiny. Margaret's had fallen out in clumps. Kaya's energy remained high. Margaret had needed naps between sentences. During one treatment day, I drove by the address where she claimed to receive chemotherapy. It was a medical building, but the directory showed no oncology practices, just family medicine, dentistry, and urgent care. When I asked about this, Kaya explained they'd moved to a more private facility to avoid insurance complications. Every answer created more questions. Every explanation felt more rehearsed. But I kept writing checks because the alternative, that she was lying about cancer, seemed impossible to accept. The timestamp proved she was hiking during chemotherapy. November 15th was supposed to be a high-intensity treatment day. Kaya had warned us she'd be unavailable all afternoon due to extended infusion protocols. Trevor was nervous. I was worried. We were both preparing for bad news about her progression. That evening, while researching treatment options online, I absent-mindedly checked Facebook. Social media had become a way to stay connected with former colleagues and their families. Kaya's profile showed a new post. "Beautiful day for a hike. Sometimes nature is the best medicine. Hashtag blessed healthy living, outdoor life." The post was time-stamped 2:47 p.m., exactly when she was supposed to be receiving chemotherapy. The photos showed Kaya on what looked like the Multnomah Falls Trail. Full hiking gear, rosy cheeks, beaming smile. She looked healthier and more energetic than most people half her age. More troubling, the man hiking beside her in several photos wasn't Trevor. Tall, dark-haired, expensive outdoor gear, his arm around Kaya's waist in one photo, his hand on her back in another. The body language wasn't friendly, it was intimate. I screenshot the posts before they disappeared, because somehow I knew they would disappear. By the next morning, the hiking photos were gone, replaced by a post about surviving a difficult treatment day and grateful for family support. But I had the screenshots, time-stamped evidence that during her life-saving chemotherapy, she'd been hiking with a mysterious man who definitely wasn't her husband. The timestamp proved she was hiking during chemotherapy. Reality was starting to crack through my denial. And underneath reality was something much worse than cancer. The BMW in their driveway cost more than her treatment. December brought what I thought was good news. Trevor called excited. "Dad, Kaya's responding so well to treatment that her doctor thinks she can take a break for the holidays. A few weeks off from chemo to let her body recover." This sounded medically reasonable. Treatment breaks were common to allow patients' bodies to rebuild strength. I was genuinely happy for what seemed like progress. 2 days later, I drove to their house to deliver Christmas presents early. I'd bought Kaya a silk scarf collection, something soft and beautiful for when her hair grew back. In their driveway sat a brand new BMW X5, metallic silver, temporary dealer plates, still wearing window stickers. I knocked on the door. Kaya answered wearing a cashmere sweater I'd never seen before, diamond earrings that hadn't been there last week. "Desmond, what a nice surprise. New car?" I asked, gesturing toward the BMW. "Oh yes, isn't it beautiful? Trevor surprised me for early Christmas. He said I deserved something nice after everything I've been through." I knew Trevor's salary, $45,000 a year selling insurance, before taxes, before the mortgage, before living expenses. There was no mathematical way he could afford a $65,000 vehicle. "That's generous," I managed. Later, I researched BMW X5 pricing. Base model started at $61,000, with options easily $70,000. The monthly payments alone would exceed Trevor's take-home pay. But I said nothing, because by then I was starting to suspect where the money for that BMW had come from, and the suspicion made me physically sick. That night I opened my laptop and began her downfall. The numbers were undeniable once I laid them out systematically. 8 months of treatment costs. August, $15,000. September, $12,000. October, $25,000. November, $18,000. December, $22,000. Plus the emergency surgery, $38,000. Plus previous family assistance over 2 years, $85,000. Total, $215,000 from my retirement savings. Gone. Transferred to accounts I'd never verified, for treatments I'd never confirmed, to doctors I'd never met. Meanwhile, Kaya drove a $65,000 BMW and wore diamond earrings. The medical inconsistencies weren't just red flags anymore. They were flashing sirens. No cancer patient undergoing $25,000 monthly chemotherapy looked that healthy. No oncologist operated completely outside insurance networks. No legitimate medical facility changed addresses multiple times in 6 months. But the cruelest realization, if Kaya didn't have cancer, then Trevor knew. Trevor had watched me write those checks, had heard me worry about her progression, had seen me research treatment options and clinical trials, had accepted my money knowing it was based on a lie. My son, the child I'd raised alone after his mother left, had helped his wife steal my retirement savings by faking terminal illness. After 35 years of saving lives, I never thought I'd need to investigate my own family. But that's exactly what I was about to do. Because this wasn't just theft anymore. This was medical fraud, insurance fraud, identity theft, federal crimes with federal penalties. I had 35 years of medical contacts who owed me favors. Colleagues in oncology, radiology, laboratory services, people who could verify what I already suspected. The investigation began that night, and it would end everything. But I recognized that 5-star resort in her Facebook photos. Christmas week brought Kaya's most audacious move yet. A Facebook post that made my blood pressure spike to dangerous levels. Christmas miracle update. Thanks to the incredible generosity of my amazing father-in-law, Dr. Desmond Keir, my cancer treatment has been successful enough for a healing vacation in Hawaii. Sometimes the best medicine is family love and tropical sunshine. So grateful for this man's sacrificial heart. Blessed, #family, #healing, Hawaii. Grateful, cancer survivor. The post included photos of Kaya in a bikini on a pristine white sand beach, crystal blue water, 5-star resort amenities visible in the background. She looked tanned, healthy, and radiantly happy. The comments poured in immediately. "Dr. Keir is an angel. What an amazing father-in-law. So blessed to have such generous family. Praying for continued healing." 47 likes within an hour. Shares from family friends who knew me from the hospital. Former colleagues commenting about my generosity and family dedication. Public praise for funding what I now suspected was an elaborate fraud. But the photos revealed more than Kaya intended. I recognized the resort from medical conference brochures. The Grand Wailea in Maui, $800 per night minimum. The suite in her photos, with the private balcony and infinity pool view, ran $2,000 per night. A week in Hawaii at that resort would cost $15,000 to $20,000. more than most people's annual vacation budgets. More damning, the man from the hiking photos appeared in several beach shots, carefully cropped, but unmistakably the same person. Dark hair, athletic build, expensive swimwear. But I recognized that five-star resort in her Facebook photos, and I was about to prove she'd paid for that vacation with money stolen by faking cancer. The man in the photos wasn't Trevor. Christmas Day brought the sickest irony of my medical career. While Kaya posted updates from Hawaii about healing and gratitude, Trevor called me. "Dad, Merry Christmas. Kaya wanted me to tell you how much your support has meant to us. She's feeling stronger than she has in months." "Where are you spending Christmas?" I asked carefully. "Oh, Kaya's in Hawaii with her sister. Doctor's orders. She needed the vitamin D and stress relief. I'm working extra shifts this week to help cover expenses." Trevor was working Christmas Day while his wife vacationed in Hawaii with another man. The Facebook photos told a different story than Trevor knew. In the resort dining room, Kaya held hands across the table with her mysterious companion. On the beach, he applied sunscreen to her back. In the pool, they embraced like lovers, not siblings. Her sister was a man I'd never met, and Trevor was apparently unaware of his existence. The timeline was perfect fraud. During her recovery week from chemotherapy, she'd flown to Hawaii for a romantic getaway, funded by money she'd stolen by faking terminal illness. While her husband worked overtime to cover expenses, she was living like a millionaire with her secret boyfriend. I took screenshots of everything before the post inevitably disappeared, but the real breakthrough came when I reverse-searched one of the photos. The image metadata showed it wasn't taken with Kaya's phone. The camera signature belonged to an iPhone registered to someone named Dr. V. Michaels. The man in the photos wasn't Trevor. He was Dr. V. Michaels. And based on his apparent medical degree and access to official letterhead, I suspected he was the oncologist who'd been providing Kaya's fake medical documentation. That night, I opened my laptop and began what would become her downfall. The vacation photos were evidence of fraud, but I needed medical proof. 35 years of emergency medicine had taught me that accusations without evidence were worthless. But evidence without accusations could destroy lives. I started with the medical records Kaya had provided, official letterhead from Northwest Oncology Associates. Dr. V. Michaels listed as attending physician. Everything appeared legitimate until I examined it with professional scrutiny. The language was almost right, but not quite. Medical terminology that sounded sophisticated but lacked precision. Lab values that fell within normal ranges but were described as concerning. Treatment protocols that didn't exist in standard oncology practice. Most telling, the signatures. I'd seen thousands of physician signatures during my career. They're typically illegible, hurried, functional. Dr. Michael's signatures were too perfect, too careful, like someone practicing to get them right. I contacted the Oregon Medical Board's database. No Dr. V. Michaels licensed in oncology. No Northwest Oncology Associates registered with the state health department. No medical practice at any of the addresses listed on Kaya's paperwork. The Hawaii photos weren't just evidence of adultery. They were evidence of a conspiracy. Dr. V. Michaels wasn't just Kaya's lover. He was her partner in medical fraud. Together, they'd created fake medical records, false diagnoses, and fraudulent treatment protocols to steal money from desperate families. I was probably not their first victim. But unlike their previous targets, they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd chosen to defraud a physician with 35 years of medical contacts and the professional knowledge to recognize their deception. That night, I began making phone calls to colleagues I'd worked with for decades, people who owed me favors, people who understood medical fraud was a cancer that needed to be excised completely. The investigation would be thorough, systematic, and devastating. I had 35 years of medical contacts who owed me favors. Dr. Rachel Martinez answered on the first ring. She'd been my chief resident when I was attending physician at MedStar Emergency. Now she ran the medical fraud investigation unit for the Oregon Health Authority. "Desmond, it's been years. How are you holding up since Margaret?" "I'm well, Rachel, but I need your professional expertise on something personal. Of course. What's going on? I explained the situation carefully. Medical records that didn't match symptoms, treatment costs that seemed excessive, a physician who wasn't licensed in our state, a diagnosis that didn't align with laboratory results. Send me everything, Rachel said. Medical records, bank transfers, communication logs. If this is fraud, we need to stop it before more families get hurt. Next call, Dr. James Patterson, Chief of Oncology at OHSU, the man whose daughter I delivered 30 years ago. Desmond, good to hear from you. How can I help? I described Kaya's alleged treatment protocol, the medication names, dosages, and frequency she'd mentioned over 8 months. That combination doesn't exist, Patterson said flatly. Those drugs aren't used together in any cancer treatment I know of, and the dosages you're describing would be lethal. Third call, Linda Chen, laboratory director at MedStar. She'd been running lab services for 15 years. Can you verify these lab results? I asked, scanning Kaya's reports. These aren't from our lab, Linda said after reviewing the headers. The formatting is wrong. The reference ranges are outdated. These are photocopies of old reports with new patient information typed over them. None of the hospitals had any record of Kaya Kier. The systematic destruction of their fraud began with medical records verification. Over 2 days, I contacted every major medical facility in the Portland metro area: Providence, OHSU, Legacy, Kaiser Permanente, Adventist. None had any record of a patient named Kaya Kier receiving oncology services. None had records of Dr. V. Michaels practicing at their facilities. None recognized the Northwest Oncology Associates letterhead. Dr. Sarah Williams, Chief Medical Officer at Providence Cancer Center, was particularly helpful. Desmond, I've reviewed every oncologist practicing in Oregon. There is no Dr. V. Michaels licensed to treat cancer patients in this state. If someone is using that name to practice medicine, they're committing a felony. The insurance investigation was equally damning. Kaya's health insurance through Trevor's employer showed 0 claims for cancer treatment. No oncology visits, no chemotherapy authorizations, no laboratory services related to cancer care. According to her insurance company, Kaya hadn't seen any doctor for anything more serious than an annual physical in 3 years. Every medical record she'd provided was fabricated. Every treatment she'd described was fictional. Every dollar I'd transferred had been stolen through systematic medical fraud. But the investigation revealed something worse than theft. Other families, other victims. A pattern of fraud stretching back months before Kaya had targeted me. None of the hospitals had any record of Kaya Kier, but several had records of other patients treated by the fictional Dr. V. Michaels, patients whose families had paid enormous sums for treatments that never happened. The truth was worse than I imagined. Dr. Martinez called back within 48 hours. Her voice was grim. Desmond, this is bigger than personal fraud. We've been tracking a medical fraud ring operating across Oregon and Washington. The name Dr. V. Michaels has appeared in at least 12 other cases over the past 2 years. 12 other families. 12 other desperate people who'd been convinced their loved ones were dying of cancer. 12 other bank accounts drained by fake medical emergencies. The pattern is always the same, Martinez continued. Young woman develops mysterious cancer. Treatment requires immediate cash payment due to insurance complications. Family members, usually older, financially stable relatives, provide funding. Patients show remarkable resilience to aggressive chemotherapy. Treatment continues for months until families become suspicious or funds are exhausted. The total theft across all cases exceeded $680,000. Kaya wasn't a desperate wife trying to pay for real medical treatment. She was a professional criminal running systematic medical fraud with her accomplice. The man in the Hawaii photos wasn't just her lover. He was Dr. Vincent Michaels, not a licensed physician, but a former medical technician who'd been fired from Portland General for falsifying patient records. Together, they'd perfected a system for identifying and exploiting families dealing with medical crises. I wasn't their first victim. I was simply their most recent target. But unlike previous victims, they'd made one fatal error. They'd chosen to defraud someone with the medical expertise and professional connections to expose their entire operation. The truth was worse than I imagined, but it was also more actionable than they'd anticipated. The lab reports were photocopied, not computer printed. Dr. Linda Chen's laboratory analysis revealed the sophisticated simplicity of their fraud. Under magnification, Kaya's official lab results showed telltale signs of document forgery. Modern lab reports are generated directly from computer systems, Linda explained. The fonts, spacing, and formatting are consistent across all results. These reports show irregularities that indicate photocopying and manual alteration. She pointed to specific inconsistencies. Look at the patient name field. The font doesn't match the rest of the document. The date stamps show different ink densities. The medical terminology includes abbreviations we stopped using 5 years ago. Most damning, the letterhead itself. Northwest Oncology Associates used outdated medical logos and formatting from forms that had been discontinued in 2018. They're taking legitimate lab reports from real patients, photocopying them, and typing new information over the original results, Linda continued. Sophisticated enough to fool non-medical people. Obvious enough that any physician would spot the forgery immediately. The technical breakdown was devastating. Vincent Michaels had access to outdated medical forms from his time as a technician. He'd learned enough medical terminology to create convincing-sounding diagnoses. He'd studied enough laboratory science to generate plausible-looking results. But he'd made one critical error. He'd tried to fool a physician with 35 years of experience reading medical reports. The lab reports were photocopied, not computer printed. Every document Kaya had provided as proof of her cancer was fabricated using stolen forms, photocopied templates, and forged signatures. Evidence of systematic medical fraud was now documented, photographed, and ready for federal prosecution. She had done this before with her own parents. Dr. Martinez's investigation revealed Kaya's criminal history. Her real name is Kaya Sullivan. She was married briefly to a man named David Sullivan in Sacramento 3 years ago, before she married your son. The California records painted a disturbing picture. Kaya had convinced her parents she had ovarian cancer requiring experimental treatment. Over 18 months, they'd paid $95,000 for her medical care. When they became suspicious and demanded to meet her oncologist, she disappeared. David Sullivan had filed for divorce after discovering his wife was stealing from his grandmother's estate by claiming to have leukemia. The elderly woman had depleted her life savings, paying for chemotherapy treatments that never happened. After the Sacramento fraud was exposed, Kaya moved to Portland and assumed a new identity, Martinez explained. She met Trevor, married him quickly, and began establishing new victim relationships. I wasn't her first mark. Trevor's family wasn't her first target. The medical fraud wasn't her first crime. Kaya was a serial predator who specialized in exploiting families' love and fear around terminal illness. She'd studied medical terminology, memorized cancer treatment protocols, and perfected the art of playing a dying patient. Vincent Michaels was her accomplice in at least 4 documented cases across 2 states. Together, they'd stolen nearly $750,000 from families who thought they were saving someone's life. She had done this before, with her own parents. The pattern was established, the victims were identified, and the evidence was overwhelming. But the federal charges would require one final piece of evidence, catching them in the act of active fraud. He begged me not to call the medical board. I called Vincent Michaels directly. The phone number from Kaya's medical records connected to a voicemail. Dr. Michaels' office, please leave your name, patient information, and callback number. Professional, confident, completely fraudulent. When he returned my call, I introduced myself as Dr. Desmond Keir, emergency physician requesting consultation regarding my daughter-in-law's treatment. Of course, Dr. Keir, Kaya has mentioned you. I understand you've been very supportive during her treatment. His voice was smooth, practiced, reassuring, exactly what you'd want to hear from your loved one's oncologist. I'd like to review her current treatment protocol, I said. As a physician, I want to ensure she's receiving optimal care. Certainly. However, patient confidentiality requires that any information sharing be authorized by Kaya herself. I'm sure you understand. Of course, but I have some concerns about the laboratory results she's shown me. The values seem inconsistent with aggressive cancer requiring such intensive treatment. Silence. Then, what values are you referring to specifically? I read him the exact numbers from Kaya's most recent lab report, numbers that Vincent himself had fabricated. Those results are from a preliminary screening, not the comprehensive analysis we use for treatment decisions. What comprehensive analysis? I pressed. What specific tumor markers are you tracking? Another silence, longer this time. Dr. Keir, I think there may be some confusion about the scope of information Kaya has shared with you. There's no confusion, Vincent. I know you're not a licensed physician. I know Northwest Oncology Associates doesn't exist. And I know you've been helping Kaya steal money by faking cancer. The line went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was shaking. Please, don't call the medical board. They'd been watching this pattern for months. The FBI Medical Fraud Unit had been tracking the Dr. V. Michaels pattern since receiving complaints from victims in Sacramento. Special Agent Lisa Reynolds explained their investigation during our phone call. We've been aware of this fraud ring for 8 months. Multiple families across Oregon and California have reported similar schemes. Young woman develops cancer, requires immediate cash treatment, disappears when families become suspicious. The federal investigation had been building cases against both Kaya and Vincent. We needed a victim willing to cooperate with a controlled evidence-gathering operation, someone with medical expertise who could document the fraud comprehensively. I was that victim, Dr. Abbott. Keir, would you be willing to participate in a recorded phone call with the suspects? We need documentation of their fraudulent medical claims for federal prosecution. Within hours, FBI technicians installed recording equipment on my home phone. The plan was simple. I would call Kaya and Vincent, express concerns about treatment costs, and request detailed medical justification for continued payments. Their responses would either provide legitimate medical explanations or further evidence of fraud. Based on your documentation and our investigation, we have enough evidence for arrests, Agent Reynolds explained. But recorded admissions of fraud will strengthen our prosecution significantly. The controlled call was scheduled for the following morning. Kaya was still in Hawaii, but Vincent was in Portland. If they continued their fraud during recorded conversations, they would provide the final evidence needed for federal charges. They'd been watching this pattern for months, but now they had a victim with the medical expertise and federal cooperation to stop the fraud permanently. The evidence filled 3 binders. Preparing for the FBI controlled call required organizing 8 months of documentation. Bank records showing every transfer, medical records proving the forgeries, insurance documents confirming no legitimate claims, communication logs tracking every conversation. The systematic nature of their fraud became clear in black and white. Binder 1, financial evidence. $215,000 in transfers to various accounts. BMW purchase documents showing $65,000 vehicle purchase. Hawaii vacation charges totaling $18,000. Designer shopping receipts from treatment days. Binder. 2. Medical fraud evidence. Forged medical records from non-existent practices. Laboratory reports using outdated formatting. Treatment protocols that don't exist in oncology. Communication logs with unlicensed Dr. V. Michaels. Binder. 3. Pattern evidence. California victim statements from Kaya's previous fraud. David Sullivan, divorce records citing medical fraud. FBI documentation of similar cases across 2 states. Social media evidence of healthy activities during treatment. Each piece of evidence told the same story. Systematic criminal fraud targeting families' medical fears for financial gain. But organizing the evidence revealed something else, the psychological sophistication of their operation. They'd studied real cancer patients' experiences to mimic authentic symptoms. They'd researched legitimate treatment protocols to sound medically credible. They'd identified emotional vulnerabilities in grieving families to maximize financial manipulation. This wasn't desperate theft. This was calculated predation, using medical fraud as their weapon and family love as their target. The evidence filled 3 binders, but it represented something much larger, proof that they'd weaponized medicine itself to steal from people who trusted doctors, trusted family, and trusted that cancer treatment was always legitimate. I made one last call before ending this forever. Trevor deserved one final chance to choose truth over lies. Despite everything, he was still my son. Still the child I'd raised alone after his mother left. Still the boy who'd brought me drawings from school and asked me to fix his broken toys. Trevor, I need you to come to my house tonight. Alone. There's something important we need to discuss. Dad, is everything okay? You sound serious. Just come alone. Don't bring Kaya. Don't tell her about this conversation. He arrived an hour later, looking nervous and confused. I led him to my study, where the 3 evidence binders sat on my desk. 35 years of medical practice had taught me that difficult truths required careful delivery. Trevor, I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer me honestly. Okay, Dad, what's wrong? Has Kaya ever shown you actual medical records from her treatments? Have you ever met her oncologist? Have you ever been to an actual chemotherapy session? His face went white. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying Kaya doesn't have cancer. She never had cancer, and I think you know that. Trevor collapsed into the chair across from my desk. His hands were shaking. Dad, I didn't know how to tell you. I found out last month when I followed her to what was supposed to be a chemotherapy appointment. She went shopping instead. The confession I'd hoped for and feared. Why didn't you tell me? Because we needed the money, and because I was afraid you'd never forgive me for being such a fool. I made one last call before ending this forever. But first, Trevor would have to choose between his wife and his father. Between continuing the fraud and facing the truth. Her face went white when she saw the evidence binders. Kaya returned from Hawaii, tanned, relaxed, and completely unaware that her criminal enterprise had been systematically dismantled. She walked into my house wearing designer clothes purchased with money she'd stolen by faking terminal illness. Desmond, how wonderful to see you. Hawaii was exactly what the doctor ordered. I'm feeling stronger than ever. I'm sure you are, I replied. Please sit down. We need to discuss your treatment. I placed the 3 evidence binders on the coffee table between us. Kaya's eyes immediately fixed on them, and her confident smile faltered. What are those? 8 months of evidence proving you've never had cancer. Her face went white when she saw the evidence binders. I don't understand, she whispered. You understand perfectly. Vincent Michaels isn't a licensed physician. Northwest Oncology Associates doesn't exist. Your lab reports are photocopied forgeries. Your medical records are fabricated. And you've stolen $215,000 from my retirement savings by pretending to have terminal illness. Kaya's composure cracked completely. Desmond, I can explain. You're going to explain everything to the FBI tomorrow morning. Trevor sat silently beside her, staring at his hands. He'd already confessed his knowledge of the fraud during our private conversation the night before. We have 2 options, I continued. You can return the money, confess to federal authorities, and cooperate with their investigation of other victims. Or you can maintain your lies and face federal prosecution for medical fraud, insurance fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The woman who'd convinced me she was dying of cancer was finally being diagnosed with something incurable, the consequences of criminal fraud. She tried to claim it was all Vaughn's idea. Desmond, please listen to me, Kaya pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Vincent convinced me this was just borrowing money until his medical practice got established. He said you'd never miss the money, and we'd pay it all back. The lies continued, even in confession. Vaughn told me that wealthy doctors always help family members, and this was just accelerating help you'd give us eventually anyway. He said the fake medical records were just paperwork to make the loan official. I opened the first evidence binder and removed the Hawaii vacation photos. Did Vincent also tell you to vacation in Hawaii with him while your husband worked Christmas Day? Kaya stared at the photos, her fake explanations crumbling. Did Vincent tell you to buy a $65,000 BMW with stolen money? Desmond, I know this looks bad, but did Vincent tell you to fake cancer to steal from your own parents in California? Silence. I placed the California police report on the table. David Sullivan's divorce decree. FBI documentation of her previous medical fraud convictions under her real name. Your name isn't Kaya Kier, it's Kaya Sullivan. You've been running medical fraud schemes for 3 years across 2 states. Vincent isn't your doctor. He's your criminal partner. And Trevor isn't your victim. He's your accomplice. She tried to claim it was all Vaughn's idea, but federal prosecutors don't care whose idea it was. They care about systematic criminal behavior, documented fraud, and provable intent to steal. The evidence binders contained enough documentation to ensure federal prison sentences for both conspirators. Trevor chose her over truth, even with proof in front of him. The moment that defined our relationship forever came when I offered Trevor one final choice. You can testify against Kaya and Vincent, help recover the stolen money, and try to rebuild some kind of relationship with me. Or you can continue supporting her lies and lose your father permanently. Trevor looked at his wife, then at the evidence binders, then back at his wife. Dad, I love Kaya. I know she made mistakes, but everyone deserves a second chance. This isn't a mistake, Trevor. This is systematic criminal fraud. She's stolen money from multiple families by faking terminal illness. She committed the same crimes against her own parents. People can change, Trevor insisted. Kaya's been under a lot of stress. She's been under stress from running a criminal enterprise, I interrupted, not from having cancer. Trevor reached across and took Kaya's hand. Dad, I'm sorry about the money, but I can't abandon my wife when she needs me most. The irony was devastating. Trevor was choosing to support the woman who'd stolen his father's retirement savings over the father who'd supported him his entire life. Trevor chose her over truth, even with proof in front of him. That choice ended our relationship permanently. Not because I couldn't forgive the theft, but because he'd chosen to continue enabling systematic fraud against other innocent families. Some betrayals reveal character. Others reveal the absence of character entirely. I removed Trevor from all my accounts, changed my will, and instructed my attorney to draft documentation, severing all financial and legal ties between us. The phone rang one more time. FBI Agent Reynolds called at 6:47 a.m. Dr. Kier, we've executed arrest warrants for both suspects. Kaya Sullivan and Vincent Michaels are in federal custody. The systematic fraud that had stolen 8 months of my life and $15,000 of my retirement savings was officially over. Both suspects are being held without bail due to flight risk. Ms. Sullivan had plane tickets to Mexico scheduled for this afternoon. Mr. Michaels had $47,000 in cash and false identification when we arrested him. They'd been planning to disappear permanently. Will there be a trial? I asked. Unlikely. The evidence is overwhelming, and we have documented fraud across multiple jurisdictions. Both suspects' attorneys are already discussing plea agreements. The legal machinery that prosecutes federal crimes works slowly, then all at once. Within hours, the people who'd spent months carefully constructing elaborate medical fraud found themselves facing federal prosecutors with mountains of evidence. Dr. Kier, your cooperation and documentation made this case possible. Other victims didn't have the medical expertise to recognize the fraud or the resources to investigate thoroughly. 23 other families would finally get justice because one victim had the professional knowledge to expose the entire criminal enterprise. The phone rang one more time, but this call brought closure instead of crisis, justice instead of manipulation, federal prosecution instead of family betrayal. The 3 a.m. emergency that had started this nightmare was finally definitively over, but the consequences for everyone involved were just beginning to unfold. 23 other victims came forward. The federal prosecution moved with impressive speed once Kaya and Vincent were in custody. Agent Reynolds called with updates every few days as their investigation expanded. Your case broke open a fraud network we'd been tracking for 2 years. Since the arrests, 23 other families across 4 states have contacted us about similar medical fraud schemes. The pattern was always the same. Young woman develops mysterious cancer requiring immediate cash treatment. Family members pay enormous sums for chemotherapy that never happens. When families become suspicious, the couple disappears. Total documented theft exceeded $1.2 million across all cases. The oldest victims were an elderly couple in Sacramento who paid $140,000 for their daughter-in-law's fake brain cancer, Reynolds explained. The youngest was a college student who emptied his trust fund to pay for his girlfriend's fictional leukemia. Every victim shared the same story. They'd trusted someone they loved, and that trust had been weaponized against them through fake medical emergencies. Kaya Sullivan and Vincent Michaels pled guilty to federal conspiracy charges. Minimum sentences are 8 to 12 years in federal prison. Maximum sentences could reach 25 years. The plea agreements included full restitution to all victims, asset forfeiture of everything they'd purchased with stolen money, permanent bans from any medical-related employment or volunteer positions. Most importantly, cooperation with federal authorities to identify other potential fraud networks using similar schemes. Your systematic documentation helped us understand their methods, Reynolds continued. We're now training medical professionals nationwide to recognize these fraud patterns and protect potential victims. 23 other families had been saved from financial and emotional devastation because one physician had the expertise and determination to expose systematic medical fraud. Justice moved slowly, then all at once, and sometimes justice protected people who didn't even know they needed protection. He finally saw who he'd married. Trevor's call came 6 weeks after the arrests. His voice sounded hollow, exhausted, older than his 31 years. Dad, I need to tell you something. I'm listening. I filed for divorce yesterday. You were right about everything. The confession I'd hoped to hear months earlier, but too late to rebuild what had been destroyed. Kaya's attorney contacted me after her plea deal was finalized. She's been married twice before. Both previous marriages involved medical fraud schemes. The names, the medical histories, even the cancer stories. She's used the same script multiple times. Reality had finally penetrated Trevor's willful blindness. Her real name is Catherine Alvarez. She's 34, not 28. She has a criminal record in California, Nevada, and Arizona. Everything I knew about her was a lie. The woman Trevor had defended over his father had never existed. The marriage he'd chosen over family had been built entirely on fraud. Dad, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I understand now how wrong I was. What about the house? I asked. Foreclosure. Without your money, we couldn't make the payments. I'm moving back to an apartment downtown. And the BMW? Repossessed 3 weeks ago. Turned out the loan documents were fraudulent too. Kaya had forged my signature on the application. He finally saw who he'd married, but recognition came too late to prevent the total destruction of his financial life, his family relationships, and his ability to trust his own judgment about people. Some lessons cost more than anyone should have to pay. Trevor was learning that trusting criminals has consequences that extend far beyond the original crime. But justice delivered one final surprise. Asset recovery in federal fraud cases typically takes years. Victims rarely recover more than pennies on the dollar after legal fees and administrative costs. I'd prepared myself to write off the $215,000 as an expensive education in human psychology. Agent Reynolds called with unexpected news. Dr. Keir, we've located substantial hidden assets. The investigation had discovered Kaya and Vincent's offshore accounts containing nearly $800,000 in stolen money from their various fraud schemes, Swiss bank accounts, Cayman Islands investments, even cryptocurrency wallets they'd established to hide their criminal proceeds. Federal prosecutors secured full asset forfeiture. All victims will receive complete restitution for documented losses. More surprising, their criminal enterprise had been far more profitable than anyone suspected. Besides the fake cancer schemes, they'd been running insurance fraud, Medicare fraud, and identity theft operations targeting elderly patients at multiple medical facilities. Vincent Michaels had access to patient records from his previous job as a medical technician. They'd been selling Social Security numbers, Medicare information, and medical identities to organized crime networks. The medical fraud had been just one branch of a comprehensive criminal operation. Your investigation helped us uncover federal crimes worth over $3 million in total theft. Both suspects are now facing enhanced sentences under organized crime statutes. But the most satisfying justice was personal. Kaya's sentencing hearing included victim impact statements from all 23 families. The federal judge heard directly how medical fraud destroys not just bank accounts, but family relationships, trust, and emotional well-being. Catherine Alvarez received 15 years in federal prison. Vincent Michaels received 12 years. Neither will be eligible for parole until they've served at least 80% of their sentences. But justice delivered one final surprise. Sometimes the system works exactly as it should. Sometimes criminals face consequences proportional to the harm they've caused. Sometimes victims actually get justice instead of just closure. The BMW was repossessed on live television. 3 months after the arrests, local news stations covered the federal fraud sentencing. Portland's largest medical fraud case in decades made headlines. Local couple sentenced for cancer fraud scheme. The news footage included scenes of federal marshals seizing assets purchased with stolen money. Kaya and Vincent's house being secured with federal locks. Bank accounts being frozen pending victim restitution. But the most satisfying image was captured by Channel 12 News. A tow truck removing the silver BMW X5 from Trevor's workplace parking lot while his co-workers watched. The reporter explained, "This luxury vehicle was purchased with money stolen from the defendant's father-in-law through an elaborate fake cancer scheme. The vehicle will be sold and proceeds returned to fraud victims." Trevor's humiliation was complete and public. His colleagues now knew he'd been married to a federal criminal who'd stolen his father's retirement savings by faking terminal illness. The news coverage protected potential future victims by exposing the fraud methods. But it also served as a warning about how family trust can be weaponized by skilled manipulators. My restitution check arrived 2 weeks later, $187,000. Not the full $215,000, but enough to restore most of my retirement security. More importantly, the federal prosecution had recovered money for all 23 documented victims. Elderly couples got their life savings back. Young families recovered funds they'd borrowed against their homes. College students reclaimed education money they'd given to save fake dying girlfriends. The BMW was repossessed on live television, but the real justice was quieter. Families learning that the loved ones they'd thought they'd lost to cancer had never been sick at all. The relief of discovering that medical emergencies had been elaborate lies was almost worth the financial and emotional trauma. Almost. Some bridges are meant to burn. The letter from the Oregon Medical Board arrived on a Tuesday morning 6 months later. Official letterhead, formal language, but genuinely appreciative tone. Dr. Moe. Here, your professional expertise and cooperation in exposing the Sullivan-Michaels medical fraud ring has directly prevented additional families from becoming victims of systematic medical fraud. The documentation you provided has been shared with medical boards nationwide to help healthcare professionals recognize similar fraud patterns. The letter continued, "Your case has become a training example in our continuing education programs for practicing physicians. Medical professionals across the country are now better equipped to identify and report suspected medical fraud because of your diligent investigation." 23 families had been saved. An unknown number of future victims had been protected. A criminal network that weaponized medical trust had been permanently destroyed. The cost was $28,000 in unrecovered funds and the permanent loss of my relationship with Trevor. Some prices are worth paying. I keep the medical board letter on my desk next to Margaret's photo. She would have been proud that I use my medical training to protect other families from the kind of people who exploit illness and trust for personal gain. Some betrayals teach us our worth, some bridges are meant to burn, and sometimes justice is quieter than revenge, but infinitely more satisfying.